Let's take a look at opera, a dramatic story told through song with orchestral accompaniment. Listen and think. I want you to think about what this character might be singing about. Look at his facial expressions. Listen to the emotion in his voice. What does the music suggest is going on? I know he's singing in another language, but you can tell so much just by listening. Look at his costume. What character do you think he is? This is Luciano Pavarotti. He's one of the most famous operatic tenors of all time. So before you move on to the next part of the presentation, you need to pause this recording and use the link on Google Classroom to answer the questions using a Google form. Then you're going to come back to view more of the presentation. Luciano Pavarotti lived from 1935 until 2007. He was considered to be one of the most beloved operatic tenors of all time. What's interesting about Pavarotti is that he was born in Italy, and he came from a family of very simple means. Many children, they did not have a lot of money, and he grew up in kind of the regular way. And he attended university, and ultimately, after he had completed his studies in university, he discovered that song and singing was really a place where he felt the best, and he started pursuing becoming an operatic tenor. He worked very hard for very many years, and he didn't ultimately have his first leading role until he was 50 years old in 1985. After that, the sky was the limit, and he went on to perform in many, many operas, with many of the best leading operatic stars playing beside him. And he also went on to have another part of his career where he worked with pop stars to try and bridge the gap between opera and pop music, recording songs together. The piece that you heard him singing is from the story of Aida. And I'm going to do a separate read aloud about Aida and get you into the story. It is an exciting story, and it has tons of mystery and intrigue and romance and jealousy and death. And it's all surrounding the story of a young princess and her search for independence. You'll love the story, as you would many of the stories that operas are based on. They're all very, very dramatic. Things don't always turn out quite well. In fact, usually the ends of the operas are very upsetting and very sad. But they tell a great story, and they do it through music and song. Giuseppe Verdi is the composer of Aida. He composed the music, so he had to work to find words and a story that he wanted to work with. He was born in 1813 and lived until 1901. He was also from Italy, And he had many, many tragedies in his own life. And some think it was those personal tragedies in his life that added to his beautiful abilities as a composer, particularly of opera, which tended to have a lot of drama and romance and loss as part of the story. The story of Aida was written by Antoni Ghislanzonia. He wrote the libretto for Aida. The libretto is another word for the story or the words. Ghislanzoni lived in 1824 to 1893, so a little bit later than Verdi, but he did know Verdi and they did work together. He was also a journalist and a poet and a novelist, in addition to writing librettos for opera. Now we're going to work with another clip. This is another listen and think. So I want you to listen very carefully. This is Leontine Price, and she is playing the lead role in Aida. She is Princess Aida. And I want you to think, what is she singing about in this particular part of the opera? Listen to the way that oboe answers back to her call. What emotion is she expressing?
My beauty riveth raw.
It's a beautiful aria. And Leontine Price always said this was one of her absolute most treasured roles, was playing Aida. At this point in the presentation, I'd like you to stop and again go back to Google Classroom. You're going to use a second Google form. It looks just like the first one you did after watching Pavarotti. Answer the questions about what you think Aida, the character, was singing about in that aria, and then come back to continue on with the presentation. A little bit about Leontine Price. She was born in America. She lived in Mississippi. Born in 1927 in Laurel, Mississippi. That was a time in America where it was very racially charged. This is prior to the Civil Rights Movement, especially down in the southern part of the United States. There was a big divide between African Americans and white Americans. And when she discovered at a young age that she loved to sing and that she loved to sing opera, it immediately meant that she would face challenges. Not only because she was coming out of a more poverty-stricken home And going off to school to study opera was something usually reserved for people who had more money. But because she was African American, and opera at that point in time was almost entirely performed by people of European descent. Here is the final scene from Aida. Now that you know the story, you can really enjoy the emotion that these singers are putting into this final piece. This is Placido Dominga as Radames, April Milo as Aida, and then Dolora Zajic as Princess Amneris.
Il tripudio dei sacerdoti.
The sets for Aida are incredible. That is Princess Amneris. The way it's filmed, she's superimposed right next to them. But on stage, she was up above them, one flight above. And they're entombed. Such a dramatic ending. And once you know the story, you watch those scenes and you just can feel the music even more deeply. But I hope you've enjoyed your introduction to opera and to the story of Aida.